All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be volume 1 in a new series that I'm starting called Who Are the Real Coons? And the reason why I've been compelled to create a series by that name is because of the amount of misdirection, misinformation, disinformation that's constantly being propagated across the internet and social media by the wokety wokes, the pro-blackety blacks, the internet revolutionaries, as I call them, who love to create as much confusion and chaos as possible by deciding that they're going to try to guilt trip certain demographics or sub-demographics within the so-called black community by making them conform to liberal ideologies through name calling in an attempt to racially shame them for not being quote-unquote super liberal. What does that mean? What you'll find is that most super liberal Negroes are heavily into politics and activism, two modes of expression that really have not reaped many benefits for so-called black people over the course of the past 50 or 60 years or so. That's one of the first ways that they will try to create a dynamic in which they can call you a quote-unquote coon. If you're not someone who does not vote Democrat, or if you're not someone who's in favor of socialist/Marxist movements like Black Lives Matter, or as I call it, Black Lesbians Matter. But once you trace the source and the fountain of many of these Marxist quote-unquote activist movements, you'll find that normally they're being subsidized by liberal Caucasian Jewish elements, especially on the monetary side. Most of the notable figures on television are bought and paid for. As I've always stated, it's always going to start with the so-called black man, just like it's always going to end with the so-called black man. It's all up to us. It's not about the so-called black woman. It's not about activism. It's not about politics. It's not about trying to figure out a way to get that hug from the so-called white man. It's not about trying to figure out how to initiate that magical, mystical, racial conversation with the Caucasian and the other races that supposedly is going to make us feel so complete as a people. All it's about is the so-called black man understanding exactly why we are supposed to make certain decisions as opposed to exactly why we're supposed to omit certain things out of our life. That's all it's about. It starts with us. We have to start with small things and then build up incrementally so that we can regain a ruling class mentality, which is something that the so-called black man does not have. One of the main components of a ruling class mentality is to set standards. And that brings us to this video right here, and the mayor of Clarksville, Mississippi, who has decided that he's going to become an advocate of an idea that I've touched on this channel many times. That being that there is going to have to be a separation between constructive, positive-minded so-called black people and the destructive, negative-minded so-called black people who never get called coons. As I've stated, they will never call, when I say they, I'm talking about the super liberal Negro. They will never call the gang member a coon. They will never call the drug dealer a coon. They will never call the thief or the robber a coon. They will never call the so-called liberal black woman who loves to run around and have abortions. They'll never call her a coon, even though they're killing our future. They never call them coons. Those are the real coons. And that's why I'm starting this series. But just to get back to the point of this video, the mayor of Clarksville, Mississippi has decided that he's going to give the criminal element in his city an ultimatum. Either you can try to reform yourself, and we can assist you with that by welcoming you into the many programs that we have developed to assist you into becoming a better version of yourself, or we're going to give you $10,000 to relocate and leave our city. And it seems as though the so-called black man is finally starting to understand that for a certain aspect or a certain element within our quote-unquote community, you have to give them those type of ultimatums. You have to give them those type of options. That being, you're either going to be reformed or you're going to be removed. It's very, very simple shit. And just the fact that the mayor of Clarksville, Mississippi is willing to give someone of that lower caliber, someone who would rob their own people, kill their own people, sell drugs to their own people, force their own people to join quote-unquote gangs, which are just low-level Luciferian cults. The fact that he's willing to give them $10,000 to relocate, that's far more than they deserve. Because you're a traitor to your own people when you do stuff like that. You're a traitor to your own people. And you don't deserve $10,000. You deserve far worse than that. You deserve far, far worse than that. But it is what it is. So they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
South mayor wants to pay criminals to get out of town. The mayor of Clarksdale, Mississippi says he will first give criminals a second chance through programs.
That's right. But if the criminals don't...
Let me say this, as the black female anchor has stated, the mayor of Clarksdale, Mississippi is going to give these cats a second chance, and they deserve a second chance. Because you never know, maybe they never got a first chance. There are so many young black males out here, so-called black males, who are being raised in toxic environments where they're not taught anything. They don't know up from down, they don't know right from wrong because of how they're being raised. And that's a major issue that we see in the quote-unquote black matriarchy. That's why I put all the onus on the so-called black man to alter this paradigm, to change this paradigm so that we can take back control over our households, because the average liberal black female, she has no idea what the fuck she's doing. For the most part, their goal is to figure out a way to exalt themselves and glorify themselves. That's all they're about. But now that we know more, we have to do better. This is not 1987 anymore. This is not 1995 anymore. This old notion about the so-called black man not knowing that these women were like this and all this nonsense. We're in the age of information. You have brothers out here exchanging knowledge, exchanging ideologies, exchanging information, exchanging wisdom, exchanging experience. So there's no real excuse for the so-called black man anymore to keep making the same mistakes. But we have to remove that criminal element from our so-called community. Stop making excuses for them. At this point, you're either an ally or an enemy. That's how it goes. And once again, if you're robbing your own, if you're raping your own, if you're a so-called black man and you're trying to find out how you can weasel into a single black woman's household, a single black mother's household, so that you can have sex with her and maybe molest her children, you deserve far worse than what this mayor is offering you. He's offering you $10,000 to leave. You deserve far worse than that because you have betrayed your own people. You're acting as a toxin and a poison amongst your own people. But at the same time, you do deserve to have the opportunity to be reformed and changed and hopefully improved. And when I say changed and reformed and hopefully improved, I'm talking about the type of cats who might be out here robbing somebody because they don't have anything and they've never been taught how to value themselves and their people and their future. I'm not talking about child molesters and rapists. There's no hope for them. All right? There's no hope for a pedophile, a rapist, people of that nature. But once again, let's see what they're saying here.
Straighten up. The mayor says he'll pay out of his own pocket to move them out of Clarksdale. Local 24 News reporter Tish Clark is local in Mississippi.
We hope they don't commit any criminal acts, but guess what? If you're here, we will help you move out of the city of Clarksdale.
Clarksdale, Mississippi Mayor Chuck Espy, along with Chief of Police Andrew Williams, put a plan in place to prevent crime about 6 months ago, and they say, well, it's working. Officials say.
Of course it's working, because they're no longer going to stand idly by and allow these low-level Negroes, no disrespect, because there are plenty of wonderful black men and women out there who are doing what they're supposed to do, but they're no longer going to stand idly by and allow these low-level Luciferian Negroes, these gang members, these drug dealers, these people who want to pollute their own environment. We're not going to stand idly by and allow you to continue to do so. You have to be reformed or removed. So that's why you're seeing results, because finally the quote-unquote good black people are starting to put their foot down.
There's been a decrease in crime. There were 12 murders last year, 1 so far this year.
We have no tolerance for crime.
That's right. That's how it's supposed to be. Good for you for saying that. There should be no tolerance for a lot of this nonsense.
Gone out and added additional officers to our department.
The mayor and chief of police here in Clarksdale say there are 3 groups they simply won't tolerate: wannabe criminals, drug dealers, and gang members. The mayor
and those are the 3 elements that they should not tolerate. And throw in there these liberal black females who want to abort 5,000 of their fetuses. Throw them in there as well.
even said, hey, if you don't want to play by the rules, he'll pay out of his own pocket to move you out of town.
And it's not to say that you just want one criminal to move from one city to the next. They just may not have the good opportunities that they need in this city.
Mayor Espy says he'll pay up to $10,000 out of his own pocket to relocate criminals.
Let me say this. Are the opportunities and the options for the so-called black man extremely limited here? Absolutely, because we're in captivity. But at the same time, where there's a will, there's a way. And a lot of times that starts with what's going on in your environment, first in the home, then in your quote-unquote neighborhood. What many of our people like to do, unfortunately, is they like to have children for a reason other than being able to raise a family in a positive environment. When you want to have a child to quote-unquote keep a man, or when you purposefully knock up a woman so that she won't leave you, or if you're trying to have children for government assistance, things of that nature, especially when you already know that you're in a bad environment. I've never understood these stories that you'll hear many celebrities tell you about how they grew up 8 children to a 1-bedroom. You know whose fault that was? That's not the white man's fault. That's not this country's fault. That's not the government's fault. That's your mother and your father's fault. Okay? Because they had no care for you. There's nowhere in the world that you're going to tell me that you're living in poverty, but you're going to continue to have children and tell me that you care about your children. Now, I will say this. Sometimes people who are living in extreme poverty are so depressed that they're looking for a way to try to escape that depression. And they look to drugs, they look to alcohol, and they also look to sex, because sex is a way to create a momentary feeling of euphoria within yourself. But at the end of the day, you have to think about someone other than yourself. Once again, you know, I watch some of these stories about great black athletes like Floyd Mayweather or Isaiah Thomas, and they'll talk about how they grew up in terrible neighborhoods and the household that they lived in was 9 kids to a 2-bedroom and all this other stuff. All that tells me is that your parents were very irresponsible. Your parents were not thinking about you. They weren't thinking about themselves. And certain people might think that what I'm saying is harsh. It's really not. If you love your children, you'll wait to have them until you know that you can provide for them how they need to be provided for.
To other cities, or criminals can choose to live a better life.
We encourage them to stay and become great citizens of our city, and we'll do everything in our power with different skill set, etiquette classes to prepare them to become great citizens of our city.
So they do have a set.
Once again, so-called black men, each and every one of us have the responsibility to be a positive force in our community. What does that mean? That does not mean that you have to be a goody two-shoes and make a show of it and open up breakfast programs and after-school programs and all that other shit. All that means is that you can provide for yourself, provide for your family, and you have something to actually teach your children. We have to start with our own. Many times the pro-blackity blacks will come into my comment section. They'll get frustrated. Well, what are you doing for black people? What are you doing for black people? Our people have this mentality, especially amongst the super liberals, the wokety wokes, the pro-blackity blacks, that everyone else is supposed to do something for them. And as soon as I see someone say that, I know already that they had no father in their life. They had no real guidance. No lessons being taught to them as a child, unfortunately for them. When you live your life always expecting someone else to do something for you, that tells me that you're never going to be motivated to do something for yourself.
Second chance. But at the end of the day, my job is to keep the citizens of Clarksdale safe.
In Clarksdale.
That's right, sir. And that means that a lot of these low-level people, they got to go. Got to go. We love you. We want you to reform yourself. But if you choose not to be reformed, then you have to go. Because like the Reverend did at the end of the film Jungle Fever. Remember his son Gator, played by Samuel L. Jackson? He said, I love you, but you have to go. Sometimes people are so toxic that you have to put them out of their damn misery. But just to get back to the point, we have to start making very hard decisions as a people. Do we want to get better or do we want to get worse? Every day we're either getting better or we're getting worse. And if we continue to tolerate this culture of criminality, things are going to get worse. But once again, who are the real coons? That's the question. Are you a coon because you like Donald Trump? Are you a coon because you voted Republican? Are you a coon because you're not in favor of quote-unquote Black Lives Matter? Are you a coon because you're not willing to put the woman above you? Or you're not willing to accept homosexuality or lesbianism? Are you a coon because you decide to stay out of politics altogether? Are you a coon because of any of these things? Or are you a coon because you're destroying your own people? That's the real question. But anyway, peace.